You're watching The Race, a special look at Mark Data's research in the run-up to the elections. The data suggesting that the EFF could play a crucial role in at least two provinces. The ANC controls one of them. The other is, of course, the jewel in the crown of the Democratic Alliance. Let's take a look at the numbers. Total support across the provinces is what you are seeing, but I want us to zoom in on a couple of provinces, starting with the Western Cape. The Democratic Alliance, 42.6% is where it's at, followed by the African National Congress at 39.1%, and an interesting showing by the EFF at 11.7%. Bill Johnson, what do you think happened there?
Well, I think it's very interesting and complicated. All the way back in '94, when we were doing surveys, the Khayelitsha area was always the most radical in the country. Highest support for Winnie Mandela, highest support for violence, and so on. And then what happened was the rise of the DA. And as we know, every week at least 1,000 people arrive from the Eastern Cape into the Western Cape. So you had this Africanization of the electorate, and you would have expected that the ANC vote would have gone up and up. Now, it didn't. It went down and down. And this was the result of a very successful initiative by Helen Zille as mayor and so forth. And indeed, in 2017, we found that she was quite popular even with African voters as a good mayor and a good premier. Now, what seems to have happened in this election is that the EFF has reconnected with that radical tradition in Khayelitsha, and I think that's where most of those votes are coming from. And in fact, the one thing we ought to just say is that these votes are national level votes. And of course, the votes at provincial level could be somewhat different. There's always some discrepancy between those totals. And particularly the ANC loses votes between those two ballots, over 500,000 usually. So it's possible that the DA will come up somewhat. But as you can see, if you add EFF and ANC, it comes to over 50. So there is a clear possibility of an ANC-EFF coalition in the Western Cape.
Well, I don't know whether that would happen given the comments made by the ANC president only a week ago, where he said he thinks this country is not ready for coalitions yet, and he was citing the example of the Mandela Bay coalition as a non-starter, and indicating, in fact, in the conversation I had with him, that the ANC no longer has an appetite for coalition. But then, politics is politics. Stemmile, what are you reading from what we're seeing here?
Well, I think that, you know, one of the things about the Western Cape is that whilst the DA has a good record of governance in terms of clean governance and clean audits and all the rest of it, the Western Cape remains an incredibly unequal society, and in many ways one of the most unequal parts of the country. And so if you look at Khayelitsha that Bill was referring to, it is one of the poorest places in the country as a whole. And so, of course, that is a place where people will want some radical change because they really are facing the brunt of poverty and unemployment, of crime, and the lack of service delivery, really, that is plaguing most people in the country, and the sense of relative deprivation. If you're a person who lives in Khayelitsha and is coming into Cape Town CBD every day to work, or going to Constantia or going to Claremont, you will have a sense of injustice.
Let's move then to Gauteng, because here again, we're seeing the EFF, you know, showing some significant growth. How do we explain Gauteng, Bill Johnson?
Well, this is where over 1/3 of all EFF support is, although, and as you can see, it's more or less a dead heat for who's going to be the official opposition in Gauteng. What that means is that there's been a real collapse in the DA vote, both in the Western Cape and in Gauteng, their two strongest provinces, where they've lost about a third. Now, that would appear to be many people like Peter Bruce, who are counselling an ANC vote because they're pro-Ramaphosa, and that's clearly eaten very badly into DA support in that area. It's likely that the DA will still pull ahead slightly of the EFF, simply because EFF turnout will be less good. The younger age groups being less likely to turn out, less likely to register, and so on. But it's a very, very striking result, and if anything like that actually happened, it's a complete disaster for Mmusi Maimane, because this is where he comes from, and this is his first election as leader, and this will be a disaster.
Your thoughts, Thembile?
I think it is interesting. Other surveys, so the one that comes to mind is the Institute for Race Relations, have also shown that Mmusi Maimane's support in Gauteng isn't actually very high, even though this is the province that he comes from. His support is far higher in other parts of the country than it is here. And I think that the EFF... So for all of the parties, Gauteng is the most populous province, and it's also the province with the most number of registered voters. And so it is unsurprising in some ways that the EFF has been able to grow in Gauteng to the extent that it has. I think we mustn't dismiss the amount of support that the EFF has amongst the black middle class in Gauteng. And so even if it's largest membership demographic, which may be young people who are students or unemployed under the age of 30, don't turn out to vote. I think that there is a significant proportion of the black middle class in Gauteng that would want to vote for the EFF because they are unhappy with the ANC.
This is The Race. When we continue, a crucial question. What is driving voters in 2019? We'll focus on hearts and minds as the race enters its final stretch. Don't go away.